welcome to today's RUC People, and I'm very pleased to be joined by two good friends of mine and sons of Zimbabwe, Professor Mapendere and Andrew Hartnack. So welcome, Andrew and Prof. And I should just say, for those who don't know Professor, that's actually his name, not his professional title. So
Not yet.
Not yet, he's working on it. So, although it's Dr. Andrew Hartnack, I should have introduced him by his full title as well. So anyway, thanks guys, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
We're going to spend a bit of time today just hearing about your own personal stories, but perhaps also just reflecting a little bit on your connections with Zimbabwe, where you both grew up, with quite different backgrounds, I suspect, but also maybe your continuing love and involvement with your home country here, living in Cape Town, where you've both been for many years now. So maybe, Andrew, we'll start with you. Can you just tell us a little bit about, where you grew up in Zim and your family?
Sure. So I was born in Harare in 1977. So just before independence, basically. My father had been born in Zambia and grew up there and in the UK, but returned to Southern Africa. And he always had a very strong love for Zimbabwe or Southern Africa. And when he was in England as a boy, he kind of really was homesick. And so his identity and wanting to come back, I think, rubbed off on us quite a lot. I think your father in particular, or your parents do tend to influence your identity quite a lot. So for me, I think that kind of exile that he had as a kid when his parents divorced, I think influenced our experience of Zim. So yeah, we grew up, he was a journalist in Zim. He became quite well known. He wrote for papers outside of Zimbabwe, and so he was always telling stories about Zim and so on. And again, I think I then later on carried that on in some kind of way as a storyteller, a different kind of storyteller. So growing up, I went to government schools. We lived a fairly modest lifestyle. My dad drove second-hand VW Beetles and that sort of thing. So we weren't super wealthy, but certainly in the privileged category, given that in Zimbabwe, there isn't a huge middle class as such. There would be people who had, jobs and resources and plenty of other people who weren't. A largely rural society as well. So, I had a fairly, I would say, particularly privileged lifestyle upbringing, and Zimbabwe at that time was a really lovely place to grow up, quiet and also, unlike South Africa, very integrated very soon after independence. So I went to schools which weren't segregated, and neighborhoods were fully integrated pretty quickly, and so it was great. I enjoyed it a lot.
And your family unit, do you have siblings?
Yeah, I'm the middle child, and I have an older brother and a younger sister. And my mother worked with my dad in his freelance journalism kind of business. In the end, she did a lot of his admin and as well as a lot of the home-related stuff.
And how were your school years? And what kind of kid were you?
I was kind of a bit naughty at home, but at school I was quite compliant. I wasn't a mischievous guy, but I did go to schools which were quite old-fashioned. In Zimbabwe at that time, corporal punishment was allowed, and so high school in particular, if you went out of line, the headmaster and his deputy would not mind giving you a good thrashing. That's something that obviously is not allowed now. Even in Zim, I think it's not tolerated now, but certainly in those days. But I enjoyed school largely. I went to a bit of a sporty school called Prince Edward, which is a bit like maybe your Rondebosch Boys High. Very sporty, a government school, but well known. I wasn't particularly sporty myself, but luckily there was a kind of cultural scene of plays and quizzes and whatever that I could get into.
And through school, did you have a sense of what you wanted to do with your life, where you thought you were heading?
At first, I thought maybe I'd be a game ranger or something like that, but I think even then I sensed I wasn't quite the macho kind of brave person who could stand up to an elephant that easily, and I grew up in town, so I think if you're maybe a farm kid, you could do that more easily. But from early on, my folks had a subscription to the National Geographic magazine, and so I always loved reading the National Geographic, and particularly the articles about nature and human origins. So by high school, I was very much into my geographies. I mean, I was very bad at maths at school and chemistry and all those sciencey subjects, so I had to slightly give up on those and went more towards your geographies and these sorts of things. And I started reading articles about paleoanthropology and human origins, and there were lots in the National Geographic, lots of fascinating stories about human origins. And of course, Africa being a cradle of humankind, there were so many pictures of that sort of thing. So from high school, I really did have that fascination with human origins and human stories and so on. And that's kind of how I started going. By the time I got to university, I knew I wanted to study geography and anthropology. And I carried on with that and went more to the human side. The human origins thing, although I'm still fascinated by it, at that point didn't seem that viable. Subsequently, it's actually become a lot more viable because a guy called Lee Berger discovered some pretty interesting fossils up in Gauteng recently, but at the time it almost was as if everything that was to be discovered had already been discovered. So I didn't think of studying that sort of paleoanthropology stuff, but went more into the social side of things.
Okay, well, we'll pick up on that a little bit later, Andrew. So, Professor, tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born and where you grew up.
So, thank you, Asa, for having me today. So, yes, like you said earlier on, that Professor is not my title name. That's my real name. So, I was born in Harare, in Zimbabwe, 1988. So I was born from a single mother who was living and working on the streets of Harare by then. And yeah, so basically it means I was born with the mother who was living on the street. So my growing up, it's a lot of things happening in my growing up, but I'm just going to join the pieces around. So growing up, we used to go to children's homes, coming back into the streets where my mother was, and yeah, but also then my mother passed away when I was very young. Then yeah, so I started staying on the street on my own full time.
How old were you when you were on your own?
My mother passed away when I was 7. Yeah. So when I was 7...
Did you ever know your father?
I did not know until today. I don't know my father. So, but I've got a sibling, I've got a younger sister. So when my mother died, my sister was 3 by that time, but she was also taken away with some well wishes by that time. I don't even still remember their names anyway. When my mother passed away, I started living like on my own permanently on the street of Harare. And then, like I said, we used to go to children's home and come back. So when I was 8, we were with, like basically there was a cleanup campaign that was happening on the streets. And I still remember the mayor by that time, it was Solomon Tabengo, who was the mayor of Harare. So there was a cleanup campaign of removing all the people or young people living on the street. So I was one of the people who was caught, and I resisted by the time, but we were taken as a group of young people to a refugee camp down east of the country called Mashonaland Central, but down into the area called Rushinga, where there's a camp, a refugee camp where Mozambican people used to come and be a refugee there. So we went to stay with the refugees, the Portuguese, the refugees, Portuguese Mozambicans from Mozambique at the time. So that's when I started going to school, the grade 1 in that area. And I guess because my love for school was like good. So I stayed there. We were a group of 36 young people were sent there. But within a week, we were left only 4. Others have already gone back to Harare. But I stayed. So when I stayed until when I was in grade 7, then now we finished writing grade 7 and I was waiting for my results for grade 7. We finished around October. So the results were coming for me to go to my high school. Then the spirit of the earlier other guys came. I also left the camp, going back to Harare. So when I went back to Harare, I went back again on the street.
How old were you at that stage?
Around 14, 15, by that time, 14, 15. So I went back again to the state of Harare. So when I went back to Harare, I had to travel around states around while my grade 7 results were not out. Because actually my other brain was like, okay, I've done enough for school. Grade 7 is enough for me. So I went to Bulawayo, I went to Mutare, I went to Gweru, traveling around. So my results came to find out that I was the top of my results in grade 7. So when because now there was an organization which was called Just Children Foundation, which was like now taking care of us from the directive of the mayor who was clearing the city. So the Just Children Foundation was like a drop-in shelter for young people, for children trying to. So they had that the results were out and I was the top. Now they started looking for me everywhere. They did not know where I was because they wanted me to continue with this. So by that time, I think the results were coming. I was in Bulawayo, but I did not know what. So in Bulawayo, I met also this other lady who was saying they want to send me to school and I told them no. I've actually completed my grade 7. What is it? So when you hear that you are number 1 and you are the best and so forth, inside me it motivates me like, but I'm good at school, so I must continue. So I started my high school. This side is grade 8, but there it's called Form 1. So I did Form 1, Form 2, Form 3. So when I completed my grade 10, so that was also the time things started turning very bad. From the 2000s going up, things did not go well with Zimbabwe. And then when I finished my grade 10, support also started dwindling from where I was in refugee camp, so support started dwindling, things were not coming. Now I had to survive on these things of going even in the villages to go and maybe help in the farming to get food and so forth and so forth. But the thing that was keeping me motivated was very strong is that I was good at school.
Yeah.
So I could say, man, I'm almost finishing, but now to go to another year in because I was left with 1 year to finish my ordinary level, my high school ordinary level. Then I went back again to her and I told them I no longer want to go to, I no longer want to school again anymore. And because of 1, 2, 3 reasons, okay, so they said, no, we can support you. Just go and finish this 4th year. I went back again. So I went to finish my 4th year. That's when I connected with Streets Ahead. The Streets Ahead now it's now youth organization that cater for young people, especially youth going forward, but obviously they had little ones that they were there from 6 years going up. So we started going there. So it's Streets Ahead, there's no accommodation there. You go back into the street, you come during the day, you just wash, clean your stuff, wash your clothes, get food, lunch and so forth, then off you leave at 3 o'clock. I take a bus ride and I went to take my result. Wow, boom, I passed my O level. When I took my result, I went back to Street Ahead in Zimbabwe, in Harare. I told them this is my result and they asked me what I wanted to do. So for me, I did not know a lot of things. Remember when I left Harare, I was very young to go to the refugee camp that I spent almost like 7 years before I come back to Harare. And I just got with one of the college schools. It was a college turned into high school, just close to Street Ahead. It was close to the organization, but I get caught with their uniform and blazers, and you see them in text with their passport, go out Street Ahead, going to their soccer pitch play, and I said, I want to go to this school. So I went to Chester Academy and inquired, and I got a place, and I went there, and I told them this is the place, and this is where I want to go, and nothing else. And so they complied, and I started going to Street Ahead for my advanced level now from 5 and 6. So when I was earlier in Form 5, that's when I met Russell and Selena. So I was involved in a number of activities that actually Russell and Selena were running at Streets Ahead about peer education and so forth. So we're trained to be peer educators, to help other people living on the streets and also. But remember, I was also in and out of the streets. So, and then I completed my A level there and at Trust Academy.
So, Prof, I mean, it's a remarkable story of, you know, living on the streets from age 7, both parents, we didn't know your father, your mother had passed away, you know, refugee camp, trying to complete your schooling through all those years without any parent figures in your life, you know, just having to survive. I'm sure you had to learn many skills just to to stay alive. That's you know, a remarkable story that you managed to complete your studies. So we'll come back to what happened next in a moment, but I want to go back to you, Andrew. So, you know, you had this growing interest in anthropology, left school, then you went to study. Where did you go and how was that?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be able to come down to South Africa to study at Rhodes. My brother had already done so, and it was just lucky because my dad was a freelance journalist and it wasn't clear that we would necessarily have the chance to come to South Africa for university. I could have gone to the university in Zim, but I was quite keen to get a different experience, and at that time the certain newspaper group he was working with allowed, it meant that he had a bit more money, and I came down in 1998 to Rhodes, and I started studying. I started with a Bachelor of Arts in anthropology and geography and other kinds of subjects, but I kind of quickly converted that to Bachelor of Social Science because I thought that would be a bit more marketable than the arts. Because people say, like, what's the difference between a Bachelor of Arts and a family-sized pizza, which is you can feed a family with a family-sized pizza. So in second year I changed to a Bachelor of Social Science and got into that. But being in South Africa, I always looked back to Zim, and when I had to do, anthropology is a subject where you have to do a lot of practical projects and that sort of thing. So I always looked at Zimbabwe as and it was always my intention to go back to Zim. I was actually pretty homesick in Grahamstown. I found that the whole sort of university drinking vibe was a bit hectic, and it was always my intention to go back to Zim and work. Which after my honours, actually for honours, I wanted to now come to the University of Zimbabwe, but that was around the year 2001. And the professors there actually advised me, we've had a 6-month shutdown, just carry on at Rhodes and get your honours.
Mm.
So I did that, even though I didn't want to. But by that time, I was a bit more settled and I was a bit more mature, so I wasn't that as homesick. But I came back to Zim after that and started working for an environmental NGO in 2002 and 3.
So you did the undergrad studies at Rhodes in Grahamstown. When did you meet Helen?
So I actually met Helen in the first year that I was there, in 1998, when she was 16. I was in the same anthropology class as her older sister, Steph. And me and Steph and a couple of others were quite friendly. But then I also met the younger sister, Helen, at that stage, who was sort of rosy-cheeked 16-year-old in grade 11. We went to the same church and actually played in the same worship. Well, at that time I didn't play in the worship group, but she and her sister were playing piano and flute and stuff in the church worship team. I only later learned drums and started playing. But I've known Helen for a long, long time. But there was no romantic anything until when I went back to Rhodes for my master's in 2004-05.
Right.
And then we became closer friends, and then things started happening from there. So,
okay. And so maybe take us through that journey. So you went back to Zim, but then back to Grahamstown to pursue your masters. And was there more of a clear sense of direction starting to emerge then?
So I'd worked for this environmental NGO called Environment 2000, which was great because I always had that geography environmental side to my particular interests. But that time, 2002-03, the Zim dollar was completely crashing. And I remember my salary, I got around 3 million. I started off on about 300,000 Rand, Zim dollars a month, which wasn't very much, although it sounds a lot. But within like a year, it was 3 million. But the actual value, I could buy about 4 or 5 pies with my monthly salary. So I was living at home with my parents, luckily, and my salary, I realized at that time there's no way I can actually survive on an NGO salary which is 5 pies, you know. So my supervisor, there was a professor at Rhodes who I'd made a very close connection with, Chris DeVette, and he was someone who was a kind of expert in displacement, refugees and what happens when people are displaced. So at that time, 2002-03, the church I went to had a mission station on a farm close to Harare, and the farm workers had all been displaced because of the land reform process. So I started getting interested in this issue of farm workers and what had happened to farm workers, because nobody at that time seemed to know what had happened to farm workers when the farms were taken over. And I wanted to find out and I was actually one of the first people ever to publish properly on what happened. And so I realized I could do this master's study with this displacement expert looking at farm workers who had been displaced in Zimbabwe. So a strange parallel with Professor's refugee kind of experience, because, you know, in Harare and Zim, they have this repeated cycle of cleaning out people who don't belong wherever they think they should and sending them off to places like what happened to Prof. But interestingly, I was now looking at these farm workers, most of whom came from Malawi and Mozambique and Zambia originally, but had been in the country for 40, 50 years with their children. And I then did a study then in Masters back at Rhodes, but fieldwork in Zimbabwe. And that happened during Operation Muramatrina, 2005, which was yet another of these processes where the cleanup campaign happens, where actually they break down any informal sector stuff, and anyone who's not supposed to be in this supposedly clean, wonderful sunshine city, as they call Harare, is basically removed to wherever they plan to send them. So I got to see that firsthand too.
So came back here to study, and was there still the idea to go back and live and work in Zim, or is that and when things got more serious with Helen, and did that start to shift, and was it also influenced by, the deterioration in Zim, and, is there a future for me back in Zim?
Yeah, very much. I mean, at that time, there was the things weren't great in terms of the economy and so on. But also Helen and I decided to get married, and it was not very easy to get married and then say, let's go start our life in a country which is basically, by 2006 things were really plummeting.
Yeah.
And I didn't have anything really I would have to go back and start from scratch. I didn't have a family business or something which I could just go and start in. I would have to have gone, and I knew working for NGOs was tough. At that time, the funding had dried up for a lot of NGOs as well. I just knew that, okay, let's try and see if we can. And we chose Cape Town because it was easier, and the trains we knew would run. And I think Helen just felt more comfortable coming to Cape Town. She couldn't wait to get out of Grahamstown because it was quite small. And quite, she didn't really fancy staying there. And I thought Pretoria or somewhere like that would be good for me for the NGO development agency thing, but she thought it would be a bit difficult to just go there and get things started. We didn't have a car and we didn't have a lot of resources. It kind of relied on coming here and finding a job. And as you know, the first job I did when I came after a few months of nothing was I went to work at Parliament as a researcher for the opposition, the DA, which was an interesting experience. I was a bit naive about South African politics, and it taught me a bit about the policy and political kind of system, but I was told subsequently by someone that it was a bit of a black mark on my CV to have worked for the DA. But I think it was actually an interesting experience in any case. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we'll pick up on that a little bit more as we go along, but I do remember, Andrew, when we met around that time, I certainly sensed a lot of sadness on your part for not being in Zim. You were sort of here but didn't really want to be here.
And my dad died 3 months after we came here as well, suddenly and unexpectedly. So that also was, a big shock and not easy to deal with.
So, Prof, you finished your schooling, and then you had a sense of what you wanted to do next. And how did you find your way to Cape Town?
Growing up, when I started planning to what I wanted to do in future in my high school, and I wanted to be an economist. The organization that I was also straight ahead was in a brink of closing. They could not have funding because the NGO they were funded and the government of Zimbabwe has also banned all the foreign support for any organization because they were saying they were playing part in politics. All NGOs were closed. Like even recently I heard that they are planning to close all NGOs again. But anyway. So when I think I met you once, Russell, but Selina was always the one coming to Harare. So
just to say for people listening, Selina and I worked for an organisation called Hope HIV, and we were one of the funders of Streets Ahead. So that's why we visited from time to time.
Yes. So when you were visiting, I remember we had sessions. Selina wanted to know what you want to do. She was also always eager to know, especially from me and Karkai, what you want to do because we were doing our high school, and so she was so passionate of knowing, seeing our background from the city and so forth. So I told her I want to be an economist. But in that situation of speaking around, I asked the business card. So where to go? Nowhere, but the destination is South Africa. Then I thought of, okay, there's a business card that Selina gave to me. And this business card is in South Africa, Cape Town. So there was this other guy who used to know where my sister was. He was coming here he used to come in South Africa. Luckily so, this guy was staying here in Cape Town. So we started communicating. I need to come to Cape Town to look for a job. He said, nah, if you want a job in Cape Town, you need to look for a job while you are there. You can't look for a job in Zimbabwe and expect that to happen. Okay. But it was just a random discussion. My mind was basically still on that business card. That if I go to Selena or HIV, and it's because my other thing is like, okay, because I've also assisted in this and peer education, or see if there's peer education in Cape Town, I can just continue. Because that time also in when we were peer educators, I still remember we were receiving stipends from HIV. It was $17, which was, if you change it to our $3,
3 million.
millions of money. Yeah, and I still remember that I once changed one of it and put in the account. I opened an account because of that. Yeah, because we're having millions. You go and change it $1, and it was also a criminal offense to have that US dollar on the street. I wake up in the morning from the street. I just, okay, fine, I'm going to get that. Took my satchel bag. It was a small bag that you just put. I get the stipend. I went to buy that satchel bag. I think it was $1.50 or something like that. Nothing inside. I just, whatever that I was buying on the road. And I went to book my ticket to Cape Town. I did not know even Messina, not even Pretoria, not even Joburg, not even, the only name that I know was Cape Town. So I went to the buses and I asked them, I need a bus that goes to Cape Town straight. So when I arrived here, I think I arrived, it was on a weekend, on a Saturday. Yeah, so on a Monday I went to Selena. Oh, and she was shocked to see me, and wow, how did you come here? And so forth and so on. And I explained all the situation and the stuff. They said, okay, so how are you doing and how are you? So yeah. That day she just, okay, I told her where I'm staying and all, she helped me with some few things there and said, okay, fine, can we meet on Sunday, because it was now Monday it was during the week, obviously I was working. Can we meet on a Sunday and can we meet and maybe we can go to church together and we'll pick you up somewhere and then we can meet? And I said, no, it's fine. So the following Sunday, that's when I came here at Holy Ghost Church and I was introduced to the church. Yeah, so at that time we haven't spoken to details of what I want to do and so forth. But what I told in the office there, I said, I'm coming here to look for work. So a few weeks down the line, I realized I started connecting, and also she was helping me connecting with a lot of organizations around here. So in the process, discussion with Selena and Russell at the time, and then I told them that I think I need to continue studying. Because the thing that I was expecting is that because I've done A-level, if I go to South Africa, I'll get any job. But I realized that when you get here, they don't even know what is A-level. So you need to convert all these things and you need to change around, to change this, need money. And so that's what I was just saying with that guy. And also I know that, I became also a burden to this guy now. To cut the whole story long short, and I was like, okay, I want to go to university. So initially, really, I wanted to do economics and so forth. So I told Selena and Russell that, so I went to do my applications and stuff. So when I told residents that I did my applications in universities and so forth, so also that's when they see that, really, this guy is really serious, he wants to pursue his education and stuff. So that's when one day I think I received a message, a call from Russell and said, look, for your university staff that we are thinking of to fund you for that university, as long as you are able to get the admission of university. But we'll only fund you when you are going to do social work. Which was also part of the things that in our discussion what I wanted to do, because I felt that from growing up, from childhood basically, not from 7 years, from childhood when I was born, I was into the hands of different social workers, and I knew how they help to change people's life and stuff. So I said, no, this is very important for me, and because I need to pay back to the community and for where I am and for where I come from and stuff. September, October, November there, I get a response for provisional acceptance at 3 of the universities that I've applied. That was UWC, University of Cape Town, and VETS. But VETS obviously was already out of my context because it was done in Joburg, and I said, if I go there, where am I going to stay? I've met families here, I've met a number of people here who started creating family. That's when I also met you, Andrew, and I started knowing more people. I met Herbert, who was here as well, and a number of Zimbabweans, and we started joining their families, and here and there, Herbert also supports me. There was a school team, not school team, church team, soccer team, which was here by that time, and I became integrated. Things started moving, you know, a day just go boom, a day go boom, and like things are going well. So now, then towards the end of December, I get the final acceptance from 2 universities. This, not yet, but from University of Cape Town and UWC. University of Cape Town, I was accepted for social work. University of UWC, I was accepted for because I put a second choice as a BCom, BCom General. Because my subject were more of account, commercials, maths, business and math, and economics, sorry. So, yeah. I was happy that I was accepted at UCT, and I told Trasa and Selena, and they started arranging the process of me starting to go to my school. Here comes orientation in January. I went for orientation, very happy. I'm at UCT. I did all the orientation. We get t-shirts, we get books, and we got, you know, those prospectus book and everything. The whole campus now, we know which one is upper, middle, and so forth and so forth. On the last day of the orientation, first years, boom, I received an email from UCT. They're no longer able to give me admission at the university. Wow, what? I was at it was on our last day, and I was there at UCT, and I had to go to the humanities faculty to ask, what is going on? I received an acceptance letter. The final acceptance is here. Now I'm receiving an email to say they are no longer going to be able to give me the place. So the next option was to go back to UWC. But again, to go back to UWC, I'm accepted for BCom Gen. So on the other side, they said, no, we cannot fund for BCom Gen unless it's social work. Selena wrote a motivational letter, but you know, this process took long to understand that at one time I was almost giving up. It was on the last day of registration, but obviously I was attending lectures because others were already registering and they were attending. So I was attending lectures before registering. I was already attending social work lectures. So lastly, yeah, I don't know what motivates and what, but I still don't know what happens. But I was called. I was called on my phone to say I must go to the social work department or something like that. So when I get there, they just asked me, "Do you have a student number?" And I said yes. And they said, "Can I have your student number?" And I gave them my student number, and they said, "Okay, fine. You can continue. And now you are registered in social work. You are a social work student." I continued with my social work, and I completed my social work first degree in 2015, no repeating of the year, which I was also under pressure and scared that if I repeat this, then things are going to get hectic and maybe I might lose funding and so forth. So I completed it, and then I decided to also to go for my master's, same in social work. Because I also think that going higher would open more doors for me. And then when I completed my master's again, I decided, okay, fine. Actually, like what you were saying, Andrew, in all these studies, always I was thinking that when I complete this, I want to go back to Zimbabwe and work. And actually, from my undergrad, when I completed my social work, and I said, I need just to go back to Zimbabwe and work. Either going back to the organization that way I was to work there. But when I completed, the organization was also closed. And social work jobs was very, very scarce in Zimbabwe. You could not find anyone. And also, like when you finish social work here, you need also to get registered with the council in Zimbabwe for you to be able to practice. And it was a lot of things that need to be done. And again, I opted that. So when I completed my undergrad, which was funded by Russia and Selena and so forth, so luckily so that when I completed, the Department of Social Work offered me scholarship to do my masters.
Yeah.
Which was another thing that I could not resist, because there was a salary that was coming in, which means also was going to fund me, my accommodation and my food and so I was like, where must I go to Zimbabwe? There's nothing that I'm going to do, which I might go back to the very difficult situation or very difficult life that I was living before, than to just stay. And now by that time I was already on campus, having a resident on campus and so forth. So I took that. So when I completed again my masters, then I also think of doing my PhD, which I also with other people that I was seeking assistance in terms of what career choice that I must take, or what program I must do. So I also from the university also advised me not to continue with social work direct, but maybe to look around on other avenues.
I'm going to stop you there, Prof.
Yes.
So just to summarise there, when you consider the schooling background that Professor came from to complete his degree, his masters, and not failing his subjects, he hasn't mentioned you were elected to the SRC at UWC. You were one of the student leaders for the whole university, which is quite an achievement as an international student. And so that was really something. But anyway, we'll get to your work life since you graduated in a moment. But I want to pick up with you again, Andrew. You completed your masters. You moved to Cape Town, starting a new life with Helen. Obviously, things have progressed a lot since then. 2 children. Your business has developed, doing a lot of different work for a lot of different organisations, and you also enrolled for a PhD. So tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, the first few years of coming to Cape Town, I did struggle a little bit because I didn't have the connections here. I hadn't even studied here. I didn't have any connections whatsoever, except really the church was a place where a lot of people.
I think Professor had the same experience. I used to be a big network for him.
So Brian Bauer, the first weekend we were in Cape Town, said, I think you might like RUC. And he had a flat just up here in Rosebank. So we walked here and we came in, and the first service we had at RUC was the Easter Friday service where different people actually speak. And I think we heard Rhoda and Sue Ellen and others giving their little 2-minute reflections, and we didn't even see much of Robert that day, but we just thought, wow, this is a great place. So I didn't have lots of connections, but I had to build those up over quite a number of years, and I found the NGO scene here very difficult. I think unless they kind of knew you and you had some kind of, I don't know, struggle credentials or something. At that stage, I got the impression that it was the NGO sector was very kind of suspicious of someone like me for some reason. Maybe working for the DA didn't help there, I struggled to get in there. Luckily, actually, Rhoda gave me a break at that early time, and I did some assessments for her in Phumelelo Awards in 2007. And then I just started working as a freelancer, doing various things. But by 2011, things, because of the funding situation with the global financial crisis, there was also a bit of a dry up of work around then. And I decided I want to do a PhD now. And I was ready. I took a long break and I thought, okay, this has been a while, let me try. And I also, at that stage, it was partially also an identity project for me. I wanted to do something about Zimbabwe again. I had obviously worked in South Africa now, but I wanted to go and do something on Zimbabwe and so on. So I registered at UCT, and I wanted to continue with the farm worker theme in Zim and what had happened with land reform and so on. But in doing the study, it turned into something a bit bigger, where I looked at the impact of not only land reform, but the history of welfare on farms and the ways in which NGOs worked on farms and how that evolved from the 1900s all the way up, and how they were impacted by land reform and so on. So I did that project. I managed to publish a book out of it, which some members of the church will have seen and bought. And so that was kind of an identity project for me, as well as trying to get myself onto another level from a consulting or research consultant perspective. I kind of felt that it would be advantageous to have a PhD, but the study I did also took me into something which I felt was valuable, and I'm still publishing actually papers out of that. In fact, there's a paper I want to draw another parallel with Prof. I looked at one of the things I was interested in was farm workers' children, and I spent some time at an orphanage in Mapendere. And I've got some stories about the children and how they kind of cycled back between the home and rural families who made them work and so on. And I still want to publish that paper, but I need a bit of social work expertise, so maybe we can chat about that.
Yes. Okay.
Because it's got some interesting stories about how the state system cycled children at that stage through in a way that was supposed to work, but didn't always seem to work to me. So, but yeah, I did that and I finished, and it was a great thing to do. And actually, this decade, I'm looking for a new project which will also give me that. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I continue to work as a consultant. I've branched out a little bit into project implementation, not just evaluations and so on. And I've done a lot of work with the DG Murray Trust and various other NGOs. I've done a bit of work for RUC as well in the past, which was always very nice. And yeah, I'm quite excited about things at the moment, and I feel like my networks are at least much stronger than they used to be.
So Andrew, one of the other developments in your life, a very significant one, is the birth of 2 sons. Tell us about being a father.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and I think parenthood definitely changes you if you, I guess, if you're open to being changed, and it is a challenging one. So I found it really fulfilling, but I found that it's forced me to go inside and try and develop myself in various ways. My father, he was a great guy, but he did have a slightly old-fashioned, old school way of raising us when we were young, at least. Spanking and that sort of thing wasn't out of fashion yet. So I have to now find my way into fatherhood in a different kind of way, having had the upbringing that I had, which was perhaps slightly more authoritarian, and I find it quite challenging. So I've tried to get the balance right, and one of the things I did, for example, was go to the Mankind Project, which was an interesting group of men who are looking inside to understand the ways in which your wounds and your shadows and so on influence you, and support each other on that journey. So fatherhood's been really great, but again, it's also something that challenges me every day, because you find yourself shouting at your child, don't shout at your brother. What am I doing? So, I mean, these are the kinds of challenges you have, or that I have. And I find, Helen seems to be a lot more patient than me at times. But, it's a journey, and I think I just want them to grow up with a strong sense of a fair, available father who had strong boundaries, but also strong values and so on. My dad did leave me with a lot of that, but I don't think it's just a natural that I will necessarily be a good father. I think it's something that requires work, so it's something that I enjoy working on, I guess.
Okay. So, Professor, having graduated with your masters, you're now working. Can you tell us a little bit about your current job?
Yeah, so thank you for that. So when I completed my master's, obviously I had to look for a job. I tried to work in one organization called Umtawelanga, which is based in Kailicha, and also so I left. I worked on there for a year, and I left due to some challenges that were there as well. More specifically on financial challenges, and then one opportunity came when I was volunteering at one of these organizations. Small, big. It's a small, big organization. Maybe I'll explain later. So I was volunteering in this organization, and then opportunity comes that they were looking for a social worker by that time, and it happens that I also did apply to be considered. So I think the advantage that I get was that I was volunteering there, and maybe they see my contribution and my work ethics there, and they employed me. So I got employed 2020. Yeah, 2019 October. 2019 October, so that's where I am working now as a metro social worker. So Cape Town, we divide Cape Town into 4 metros: Metro East, Metro South, Winelands Metro, and Metro North. So I am the social worker for Metro East, which encompasses Strand, Kailicha, and Fulen, and I'm working with 81 children under me, and working with 13 foster mothers and 7 relief foster mothers, as well as 1 educational coordinator and 2 auxiliary social workers that I supervise. So it's a lot of work.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I guess it must be interesting to bring to this role your own personal experience growing up, without parents and your own experiences, but then your professional training and, applying that in a different context here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like I said earlier on, that my thinking of me wanting to take social work as a second choice by then was to give back to the community. So for me, I'm still thinking that I'm actually giving back to the community the same way that I wanted to do earlier on, although on a different geographical location, where I am thinking that maybe the impact was going to be more in Zimbabwe, where I know the gist of how young people grew up in reflecting to me. It was going to be easy, but I also it was going to be difficult in a sense that it was going to be emotional more than professional, because of things that I think I'm relating to this, and this is exactly what is happening, and it was going to drain me a lot, mentally wise, especially when I'm just coming from university now, but maybe with age it will go, because obviously you have to do the counseling with people, and you have to know their background, you have to see how can the best way to help, and so forth and so forth. So for me, I'm still thinking, yes, even in my current work, my background plays a role a lot, because the children that I'm talking about that are under me, it's vulnerable children, orphan children, neglected children, abused children from different backgrounds that I have to mold to be better people in future, or to be better parents in future, and providing all sorts of support that they need, day-to-day psychosocial support and so forth. So it's I can even also reflect it that it's a very difficult task that people who were in my life including you, Russell, and Selena, even the church members and everyone. It's a very difficult situation because I'm seeing it, I'm experiencing it now. That what I'm feeling now is exactly what people were feeling about me when I was growing up.
Mm.
So it's a challenge, but I'm trying to manage in all those circumstances.
Okay. And Prof, I think the other thing that is connecting you again with your Zimbabwean roots is your involvement with the MDC, which is the main opposition party in Zimbabwe. Tell us a little bit about that.
Wow, so when I joined the MDC when I was back in when I was doing my lower six Form 5, because one of the things that motivates me to join MDC, besides the seriousness of it, of the economy and stuff, it was the uniform. Because my school uniform was more relating to MDC uniform. It was red regalia, and I used to have red, Trust Academy red regalia and stuff like that. And at one time, those red clothes were banned in Zimbabwe by the government. That time when they were putting bans on silly stuff, I can call them silly, because they were not even allowed to wave. You used to wave like this because when you wave, you are assembling MDC, something like that. So that makes me to not like the government of the day at all. So I joined the MDC that year, and when I came to Cape Town, is one of the things that I also look for, because I know MDCs was structures in South Africa. Luckily, I find out there was also structure here in Cape Town, and I joined. But when I joined in Zimbabwe, when I was in high school, I was very raised through ranks to the very close to be able to know all the leadership, including the late former President Morgan Tsvangirai. He used to know me by name because I was so much involved in a lot of things, especially this thing that need young people to go and throw flyers, to drive around and give information without fear, because as we remember in the States, they used to use us because we don't care. We used to go anywhere. They say people are beating people, we go there. And they said, those are the certificates from Zimbabwe, from Harare, don't touch them. And we give information, then we leave. So that makes us to get connected with leadership and grow. And the current president, at one time I used to work with him, so some people, if they speak like we are very close, he speaks to me almost every day. So yeah. So now I am a national member. Basically, I'm a secretary for ICT in the Movement for Democratic Change Youth Assembly. So actually, I'm a management member in that structure and operating from South Africa. So basically, in South Africa, I'm the senior leader of the young people. Yeah.
Okay. And am I right, you have your own radio show as well?
Yes, we are running our own radio shows. It's called Change Radio. Change Radio. It's a radio that we thought of forming to give information that is totally different from what the state-owned radio and television give, because there's a lot of propaganda into that. So we decided to give an alternative voice to the people of Zimbabwe and to speak the truth. And we are happy that it's growing each and every day. And we are joined with a number of journalists, international recognized journalists like Opo. Just lastly to say, also in terms of politics that you're asking about, me joining NDC and politics and stuff, I was elected into UWC SRC in 2015. It emanated also from that background of being a politician. So when I come to UWC, I was involved in the student structures, political structures, and I believe, and I still believe that I am more into Pan-Africanism. So I joined a Pan-Africanist organization called PASMA at UWC. PASMA just stands for Pan-Africanist Student Movement of Tanzania. and yeah, so I joined it and I was elected into SLC, which was a shock to many that an international student being elected in SLC now I need to represent the rights and the needs of students of South Africa. While it's in an international, I still regard that as an achievement. So I've done a number of things that sometimes when I mention people and then before I finish, they start asking me, how old are you? Because I've done a lot of things that anything that comes in my work, I'll take it. So I'm standing, I'm a referee, SAFA official referee. I've done peer education. I've done the online courses of observer missions, observer elections, and election observers, and I've done a number of things. So, yeah, but
It's been a rich life.
it's nice. Yeah.
I can only fault you for your choice of football team, Professor. As a Manchester United supporter, Andrew and I are founding members of the IUC Liverpool Supporters Club, so we tolerated you today.
I know where Andrew gets the support of Liverpool from, so yeah.
Okay. Anyway, guys, we're out of time today, but thank you so much for sharing something of your journey, and it's been fascinating, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, please.